Hey YouTube, what's up and how's it going? Welcome to what is my first video of 2020. I had a similar sort of intro to the first video I made last year, actually, with a bit of a Happy New Year welcome to the regular visitors to the channel. And I had every intention to start the year off making a lot more videos, but unfortunately I have a full-time job and I've got a lot of other sort of draws on my time, and I don't make any money out of videos that I make, and YouTube have taken away the monetization for smaller channels, so it's very difficult for me to find the time that I really want to spend making content. So if you like this and you want to see more, please subscribe. If I get enough support, I might consider reaching out on Patreon, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Anyway, regulars to the channel will know that a couple of years ago I did a video looking at delidding on the Intel CPUs. I did a test with an i3 CPU and got very good results out of it, and it's something that I've wanted to revisit for quite a long time. A friend of mine gave me a couple of CPUs to test with, but unfortunately they all had soldered heat spreaders, so that wasn't something I could do anything with. But now I have a PC here. This is my wife's PC that I'm considering doing a revisit of the delidding experiments. So this is a real world example. So my wife and I have recently started playing with Division 2, and if you've had any experience playing with it, you probably know it's one of those games that's very CPU bound. Her PC is running Core i5 6600K, which is clocked at 3.8 GHz standard. She originally had an Intel Pentium dual-core CPU with hyperthreading, and that wasn't really cutting the mustard for Division. So I ended up upgrading the CPU shortly after playing the open beta of Division 2, thinking that that would cover our requirements. But we're about 16 hours into the game, and she's been having a lot of issues with freezing and stuttering while playing the game. I'm running Core i7 8800, and that has no stuttering or freezing at all. Now I know that has 6 cores plus hyperthreading, whereas this CPU, 6600K, is only running 4 cores. But I'm hoping that an overclock should help alleviate some of those issues. And whilst I'm going down the road of overclocking, I figured why not break out the De8auer Delid-die-mate that I bought a couple of years ago, delid the CPU and actually do some more testing to see how that affects performance. So join me on this adventure and let's see how we get on. So I've just zoomed down now onto the screen so I can show you some figures of where we're starting at here. At the moment, the CPU is running completely stock. I haven't changed any of the settings in the BIOS, so everything's running automatic. And I've just realised that I incorrectly quoted the speed of the CPU as 3.8 GHz. It's actually 3.9. I've just seen that in here. So apologies for that. But at the moment, we're running everything stock. The idle temperature, here we can see on the 4 cores, we're between 25 and 27 degrees, or 24 and 27 actually. And I'm going to run Intel burn test for a few cycles and see what that does to temperature before we start, just to get an idea. And then we'll go from there. So I'm hoping that we should be able to get up to probably 4.6 GHz is a reasonable overclock to try and aim for stable. That should give us a decent chunk of performance, but I'm interested to see how the temperatures are with that sort of overclock before and after a delid experiment. So I'm going to start the Intel burn test now, and we'll see how the temperatures go. Yeah, so I probably should also mention the hub I'm running here. So the PC, we're using an MSI Tomahawk Z270 gaming motherboard. We're using a Antec power supply, and we've got G-Skill Trident Z DDR4 3000 MHz RAM, 8 GB, so it's two 4 GB modules. And for cooling, we're using an Arctic Freezer 34 eSports Duo. That's it. It's a dual fan cooler. I'll show you it just so you can see what we've got here. I bought a radiant cooler. I was originally running on the stock Intel cooler in this machine, but when I did the CPU upgrade, I thought we better upgrade the cooler as well, because the whole point of getting a K-series CPU is to overclock, right? So we better have some reasonably decent cooling in there. So I'm just going to start the Intel burn test benchmark now. We'll run it for a few cycles and see what it does to the temperatures. Okay, so I've run Intel burn test for 5 cycles. I'm just running it through a 6th cycle now, but CPU temperatures are very good actually. I don't know what's normal for 6600, but or Skylake chips in general, but I'm seeing maximum temperatures of about 55 degrees, which seems very cool to me. Certainly cooler than what I'm used to when I'm looking at overclocking. So I think that sort of tells me that the cooler that I've got here is doing its job well. So that's certainly good. So I'm just going to record that in a notepad document. I think what's probably the best course of action here is to look at the overclocking options. First with the standard, without removing the heat spreader, without delidding. See how I get on trying to aim for, I think 4.6 is what I'm going to target. See what the temperatures are, and then go from there. So it's actually boosting the CPU to 3.6 gigahertz. So it has a 3.9, 39 times multiplier maximum, but I think that's only on a single core. It looks like at the moment we're running memory at 1066, which is probably low. Yeah, so the XMP profile for this RAM is 1500 megahertz. It's DDR3000, so we probably should change the memory settings as well. But I'm going to reboot into BIOS and have a look at that now. So join me in a moment and we'll see where we go. Okay, so we're in the BIOS now. I've gone into the overclock settings and I've just changed the overclock explore mode to expert. All I'm really looking at here is adjusting the CPU frequency. So ratio apply mode is basically telling it what cores you want the CPU ratio assigned to. We want it to overclock all cores. You would probably only ever want to change that if you were overclocking for a specific application that you knew didn't use all cores and you wanted to try and get a little bit of a higher boost on a single core or something like that. So all cores, CPU ratio I've set to 45, so start with 4.5 gigahertz. See how that goes. So in case you don't know, the overclock of CPU speed is based off of the CPU base clock, which is set to 100 megahertz, that's a default, and then a multiplier of ratio, which is 45. So 100 times 45 gives you 4,500 megahertz, 4.5 gigahertz. You can adjust the base clock on these, something that it allows you to do on this platform. In the past, that used to affect the PCI Express frequency and other things. On these Skylake systems, it doesn't. It's independent, although it will affect your memory speed, so you need to check your memory speed to adjust that. But for the moment, I'm going to leave that at 100. Just going to look at the CPU ratio. That's what buying a K-series CPU allows you to do, to change the CPU ratio. Ratio mode, we'll leave it on fixed. We don't want that changing. You could adjust that once we've got a stable overclock if you wanted to throttle the CPU down when you're not loading it, but for the moment I'll leave it on fixed. Everything else pretty much I'm going to leave on auto. Base clock, as I said, is 100 megahertz. RAM settings, now I said before that the RAM wasn't running at its optimal speed. There's XMP profile on this RAM. I've just enabled that, which is tweak the RAM up to 3000 megahertz where it should be. Hopefully that will not cause us any stability issues with this overclock. You can see there the adjusted DRAM frequency is showing now correctly at 3000 MHz. DRAM timing mode, we've got that on link. I haven't changed any of these settings, by the way, just the XMP profile. And the only other thing that I've changed is the CPU core voltage. Okay, we can change the voltage mode if we want to. I'm just going to leave it on auto though. We don't really want any kind of offset or anything like that going on. What we could do, if we've got a stable overclock, is we could switch on adaptive mode, which means it will lower the voltage when it's not loading the CPU so hard. For the moment we'll stick on auto, and I've put in a voltage of 1.25, which is higher than what we were running at before, but it should give us a good stable point to work off of. If we can get a stable clock at 4.5, we'll go to 4.6. If we get stable at 4.6, then I can start trying to lower the voltage until we hit stability issues. Basically, more voltage means more heat. So we want to start with that low and work upwards, but I know that to get an overclock I'm going to need a little bit more voltage. So we'll start with 1.25 as a base point to see how we get on from there. That's it. Everything else I've left at auto. So I'm going to exit out of that, and no, I don't want to quit without saving. I want to save my changes. Yes, save config and exit. So I'll reboot into the OS and we'll see what we do. So we're booted now into the OS. The idle temperatures have jumped up a bit. I would expect that. But nicely here we can see we've got our core voltage 1.264, so it's slightly higher than what I set to 1.25, but we know it's holding that increased voltage here. Then we've got the CPU speed. We've got 100 MHz base, 45 multiplier, so we're running at 4.5 GHz now. And if we flick over to our memory settings, we should see we're now running at 1500 MHz. And it's DDR, so that's doubled, so 3000 MHz is the speed of the RAM. So that's good. We've got all the settings that we expected. So idle, the temperatures here are a little bit unfair to compare against where we started because I've already run a stress test. There will be a little bit of residual heat in the cooler and the chip, but we're not really too worried about the idle temps. We're more worried about the load temps. So I'm going to start the Intel band test again. We'll let that run for 5 cycles and then we'll come back and see where the temperatures are at. Okay, so we're on to cycle 6 of the Intel burn test now. Unfortunately, the first round of testing, I got a blue screen on the 3rd cycle, so there was a stability issue. I've been into the BIOS and I've upped the core voltage slightly again. I went up to 1.29, but you'll see if you look here that the actual voltage we're reading is varying between 1.304 and 1.312. That's still fine, but no, that's fine. That's fine. But obviously, the higher the voltage, the more temperature you're going to get. So looking at this, after it's had 5 good runs on the 6th one now, we're peaking at about 83 degrees on the 3rd core. I'm not sure why that core's particularly higher than any of the others, but we are hitting 83 degrees there. 78, 79 on the other cores. That's fine. It's probably a little warmer than I'd like, but then we are running a stress test on it, so in normal use it's probably not going to reach those sort of temperatures. But that's still absolutely fine. So that's stable at 4.5 gigahertz. So the next step is to go back into the BIOS and increase the multiplier by 1 to go to 4.6 gigahertz. If that works stable, I think we're going to leave it at that point, and then we'll look at reducing the voltage a little bit. Yeah, so as I said, I increased the voltage from 1.25 to 1.29 in the BIOS, and that's kept it stable. So let's try it at 4.6 gigahertz now and see how that goes. So just to show you quickly, back into the BIOS, I've just increased the CPU ratio from 45 to 46. So we're looking at 4.6 gigahertz, 4,600 megahertz. And if we scroll down to the voltage, you can see I've got the CPU core voltage at 1.209 now. So save those changes and go back in and do the same stress test again. Okay, so we fell at the first hurdle there. as soon as I started Intel burn test, stress testing, the machine froze, completely locked up, and then went to a blue screen. So it looks like 4.6 gigahertz was a little bit too much to ask out of it at that voltage, so just got in and upped the CPU core voltage again slightly. 1.33 volts now, which is going to push the temperature up a little bit higher again, but we'll start the stress test and see how we go again. As long as we can keep it within reasonable limits, that's fine, but the aim of this experiment is to actually delid the CPU and gain some temperature or cooling benefit. So in the testing that I did on the i3 CPU, I managed to drop 10 degrees. Now that was all at stock settings, so it wasn't overclocked, wasn't overvolted. If I can get 10 degrees off the temperature here, then that will be brilliant, because at the moment we're already hitting 88 degrees. Now that's a little hot for my liking. If we could get it below 80, that would be brilliant. We have a fine line to try and balance between stability and heat. So at the moment we're running 1.336 volts, we're hitting 88 degrees. I mean, the voltage is still fine, it's not going to damage the chip, but the heat is the risk now. So if it's getting much hotter than 88 degrees, we're going to start at risk of damaging the chip. So I'll run this for 5 cycles if it manages to stay stable, and we can try dropping the core voltage slightly and see where we're at. But 4.6 gigahertz would be a nice point to hit. Okay, so we're just coming up to finish the 6th test now on Intel burn test. It's run them all successfully, but I am concerned about the temperatures. This core is hitting 90 degrees. We did briefly hit 92 degrees, and that's too hot really. I wouldn't recommend running your CPU at temperatures over probably 80 to 85 degrees, especially not for any sustained period. Really, that means I've got the voltage too high or insufficient cooling. So the voltage is hitting 1.344. After I tweaked the voltage slightly on the 3rd Intel burn test cycle, I got an error from it saying that it hit instability. So I tweaked it up again slightly. So basically that's where we're at. That's completed. So the system seems to be fairly stable, but we are a bit too hot under maximum CPU load. So that's fine. We've got a baseline to work with, so we'll put 4600 megahertz in there, and we're going to put the temperature at 92 and the voltage at 1.344 volts. Okay. So join me in my shed where I will be delidding the CPU, and let's see how that goes.